Alright, so everyone should have something to write with. Okay, so we are talking about today the life of Jesus. So you guys are going to make your own timeline. So at the top of your sheet, write Jesus timeline. However you want. However, yeah. Should have just enough. Yeah, okay, good. All right. Jesus. Caesar, you have a Bible, right?
Yes, I do.
All right. Find the Gospel of John. All right.
Sorry. Wait, is it after the Gospel of Mark?
Yep, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 1. Read it for us.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it.
All right, so John starts his gospel about Jesus and says, in the beginning was the Word. What do you think the Word is? Yeah, Jesus, right. So John says, right from the start, in the beginning was Jesus, and he was with God, and he was God. So, the story of Jesus actually starts with creation. I just want to kind of start with that. But what's the first big kind of event in the life of Jesus?
He was born.
He was born, yes!
Everybody was like on a timeline?
Like, what do we do?
You can, I want you to make a timeline on your sheet. You can do it however makes sense to you. So you can just go bup, 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 bup. You can make it a circle. You can go around, however you want to do it. But you should kind of have these events in sequence. Okay? Alright. So, we have Christ's birth. We celebrate that once a year. What do we call that? Hands.
Christmas.
Hands. I saw no hands. Yes, let's see. Christmas, yeah. What are some things that happened at Christmas? What is the Christmas story? Yeah, tell me one thing at Christmas.
The 3 wise men came with the myrrh, frankincense, and gold.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, wise men from the east visited Christ. We don't know that there were 3. Historically, we talk about 3 because there are 3 gifts. So people said, well, creation, then birth. Because he was there at creation. So often people think that symbolized that the first people who knew about Christ's birth, one of the first people, were people who were not Jews. They were not Israelites. They were these foreign people that Christ came for everybody. What else? Who else was there at Christ's birth?
Mary.
I need hands. Dylan.
Mary.
Mary and?
Joseph.
Alright, so we had Mary and Joseph. Jesus was born just like everybody else. He was born a human. He was born, incarnated on earth to live with us. What else was there in the Christmas story? Who else was there in the Christmas pageant? We have what? Yes?
The angels.
The angels, right. Angels foretold of his birth. And there's one other group of people.
The donkeys.
The shepherds, yes. There may or may not have been donkeys there, but they're not people. And that's, yeah.
Why not?
So the shepherds, again,
Yeah, there's probably
the other people who were first told about his birth were these common, relatively poor people living out in the fields. So, alright, Christ was born.
How do you spell shepherds?
Usually S-H-E-P-H-E-R-D-S.
You're in 9th grade.
Whoa, hey, obviously that's a dumb question because she asked how to spell it, so obviously doesn't know how to spell it, so you didn't even have to ask that. Alright, so we have one story about Jesus as a child. Does anybody know what that is? There's one story of Jesus as a boy. One story.
That's not the same as Mary.
I think I know it.
No, that was George Washington. Andrew, do you know?
Was it the one where he was in the cave with the dragon?
No, there's no dragon. Yes. One more guess. That's how you. So we have this story where his parents and a group of other people from his town.
I'm running out of room.
You don't have to put all this stuff.
Well, no, I'm putting it like.
You don't need to do it. That's not the scale.
That's fine.
If this is creation, you're writing one like.
Emma, if you ran out of room, you have another piece of paper. Alright. So, basically, his parents go with a group of people to the temple, and they're on their way home, and they're like, where's Jesus? And they go back, and he's behind at the temple, and he's talking to all the people, and they're really, it says, amazed at how much he knows and the awesome questions he's asking. That's the only story we have of him as a child, and it's only in one gospel. Most gospels skip right to where Mark started. What did Mark start with regards to Christ? What was the first story in Mark?
Him being baptized?
Him being baptized, right. Most Gospels, Mark just starts with the baptism. Matthew and Luke have his birth and they jump right to his baptism. They say it's important to know how he was born because, you know, it was the Holy Spirit and all these people. But his ministry didn't really start till his baptism. We don't really know what he did. He may have just lived a normal life. But he gets baptized by John the Baptist, people think around 30. Anybody remember what happened at his baptism? He comes to the river and John baptizes him. And the Holy Spirit came down from heaven like a dove. And God said, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. So, and I should have said from the start, we don't have a lot of time to go through this life of this very influential person, so we're kind of doing a Cliff Notes thing here. So, he's baptized, he starts his ministry. What's one of the first things he does? Yes?
He gets his disciples.
Yeah! He has this great mission to do, so he's going to get his team together. He's going to collect his squad. Who knows any stories of him calling the disciples?
Two of them were like fishermen or something.
Yeah.
And he tells them like, oh, I'll help you catch, like with your nets you'll catch men instead of fish or something like that.
Oh yes, I remember.
He goes to the lake, and Peter and Andrew are fishing with their father, and he says, come with me and I'll make you fishers of men. Or another translation, you will fish for people. So, they drop their nets, they leave their family business, and they come with Jesus. Another one I like is Matthew is a tax collector, and he has this little booth. Kind of like his little...
everybody hates him.
Like if you go into a bank, you know there's a little teller window? That's where Matthew's sitting in this little booth like a little teller window. People didn't really like tax collectors. Because they were tax collectors.
Yeah.
It was also, but there's also this thing where if you worked as a tax collector for Rome, so like let's say everybody owed like 10%, let's say. They would say you collect 10% and you can collect a little extra to compensate you. That's your pay. You collect a little extra for your time, like a little fee for the tax collector. Now if I can set my own fee, obviously I'm incentivized to make it maybe a little high. So people thought tax collectors were a little, I don't know, there was a lot of suspicion that they were all corrupt, they were dishonest, and nobody really liked them because they were tax collectors. Even if they weren't, even the ones that weren't, they came and took some of your money.
I don't blame them.
But he says to Matthew,
I mean, you do the same thing, like you kind of have to be like, if you were in their shoes, you do the same thing to other people.
Maybe.
Wait, question.
I would not, but maybe some would. So, yes.
Should Rome be the tax collectors? They're the ones who are hiring.
No, but only the Christians were the
It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier just to do it that way, because then it takes out another transaction thing, and
also
we'll go to the Roman government if we have time at the end. But basically, he went up to Matthew and said, "Hey, come with me. I'm going to do cool stuff." Matthew says, "Sounds good." Leaps out of his booth and walks right with Jesus.
All right, do the same thing.
So he called his disciples. How many disciples did he call in total? 6 hands. I need a hand. I see no hands. Oh, someone who hasn't raised their hand yet.
Wow.
Someone who hasn't raised their hand yet. Yes. 12. 12 disciples. Were those his only followers?
No.
No. Those were kind of his main ones, but there's a lot of stories where there's one where he sends out 100 people to go. He's like, hey, 100 of you go out to towns and tell them about me. We know that there were a lot of other people who followed him. A lot of, there was all those women who were there at the cross. They were followers of him. So, but he had these 12 main guys. They were kind of his managers or whatever. All right, so he gets his disciples. He goes out and starts doing his ministry. So in all the Gospels, we're not going to do a timeline of this journey, but essentially, if we're breaking it down, we have a couple different types of stories of Christ during his ministry. So, we have stories of his miracles. So you can write down miracles. On the back of your paper, flip your paper over for a second. I want everybody to take 90 seconds and try to think of 3 miracle stories. 3 miracles that Christ performed. If you want to go all out, you don't use the feeding of the 5,000 we just talked about, but if you have to, you can. Go.
I thought you were going to ask us to draw something.
No, you don't have to draw something. Just write down 3 miracles.
I don't know how to spell this. Okay.
I don't know what half of these are called.
It's fine. You can just describe it as best you
I'm
can.
just describing what happened.
A lot of them don't have official names. Like, if you read a Bible, the chapter will be titled, like, The Miracle of This. But in the original text, it was just a story. Jesus went and did this, and something crazy happened. And so there's no actual, you don't need an actual name. That's fine. That's good. 3 is good.
I just have 3 easiest ones.
But at the very least, everybody should be able to think of one, because we talked about one this morning already. When you're done, put your pencil down and look up here, then I'll know you're done.
I said the one that we didn't.
I can only think of 2.
That's fine. I'm sure by the end you'll have more.
I have 3.
These are lots to do with
That's the
water.
thing.
Water to walking.
Wait, what's one?
Whoa, Caesar. Let people think of their own.
I did that. You're just going to stop when he made someone.
Oh, me and Lexi. I did not copy.
It doesn't matter.
I didn't copy my sister yet. We have the same one.
Yeah, well, you guys are related.
Yeah, that's true. We have like the same.
And being able to think of Jesus' miracles is a genetic trait. So related no, I'm just kidding. Related people tend to think of the same miracles when asked that question. All right, pencils down. Okay, everyone look up here. So, if you have less than 3, as somebody says one that you don't have, you can write. So by the end, everyone should have at least 3. Who's got 1? Boom.
On the healing of the blind man.
Healing of the blind man, yeah. There are actually a couple. So we have a whole bunch of healing ones, but yeah, blind man. The one I like is where he puts mud on his eyes and he goes wash it off. There's another one where he puts his hand in his eyes. He says, "Can you see now?" And he says, "I see people, but they look like trees walking around." So
Yeah,
again, he's like, "All right, yeah, now it's good." It's like an eye doctor. Better or worse? Better or worse?
Oh, I hate
Next.
that. He turned the water into wine. I've never.
All right, so we have I'm gonna
Doctor before.
water into wine.
Oh
Nice.
yeah.
Yes.
He heals the leper.
Okay. Water to wine is one of his first miracles, where he's at a wedding, they run out of wine, and his mom goes, "Yo, Jesus, take care of this. Can't you do something?" He's like, "It's not my time yet." She's like, "Come on." He's like, "Okay, Mom, for you." And he turns it into wine, yep. Healing the leper. There's one where he heals like 10 lepers, and he tells them to go wash in the thing, and they're all like, "Yeah, we're healed." And only one comes back and thanks him. And he says, "Weren't there 10 that were healed? How come you're the only one who's like polite?" That's weird. Leprosy is a disease. You can see it on your skin. Basically, your flesh is like decaying. It's not contagious, but they thought it was. They thought it was very contagious. So lepers had to live outside communities. They were outcasts. Nobody wanted to talk to them. So being healed by leprosy was a big deal because it also meant now you could be back with people. Yeah. All right. There's a couple. Yeah.
But there was one where he healed the guy and he told him not to tell anyone.
That was another one. Yeah.
And then he left.
I used the bathroom well.
Yeah. Wait till we're done with the miracles.
Wasn't there like
Dylan.
an old?
When he helped the lame walk.
Yeah, there's one where we talked about where the people lowered the. There's the paralyzed guy, and they lowered
that's
him
what
to the
I
roof.
said, but I said the healing.
Hey,
There's a couple like that too. All right, miracles that weren't healing. Is there any other miracles that didn't involve healing? Yes, Kelly. Oh, that was in the Old Testament. That was a miracle. That was Daniel in the lion's den. And they threw him in there, and in the morning the king's like, "Hey, Daniel's going to be good and eaten," and he was fine. And it said angels held his lion's mouth closed. That wasn't Jesus, but that was a miracle in the Bible. Yes?
Like the one where he's on a boat with the disciples and he like calms the storm.
Yeah, there's this huge storm. They're on this little fishing boat in the middle of this huge lake. And they wake him up and say, "Why are you sleeping? We're going to die." He's like, "Don't you know who I am?" And he tells the storm to stop, and it does. And he goes back to
And
sleep.
also they're walking on water.
Walking on water. That's another one.
Yeah, that one.
I didn't even.
That's another one. The disciples are on the boat, and there's this kind of storm. And they see this figure walking on the water toward them. They think it's a ghost. And he gets closer, and it's Jesus. And Peter says, "Call me to you, and I'll be able to walk on the water too." And Jesus calls him. And he starts walking, but then he sees the big waves, and he gets scared, and he starts sinking. And he cries out for help. And Jesus is
Wait,
like...
I remember watching a video and it was like a fisherman or something. He was walking. And then he was like, I don't know, he fell.
I mean, I don't know necessarily if
Is that the same story?
Yes.
See one more.
I don't know if it's a miracle, but there was like this one story where they were fishermen and they were fishing on one side of the boat, and then Jesus said, "Oh, fish on the other side of the boat, you catch fish." I don't know.
Yeah, that was
Like
after his
one
ascension.
to
But yeah, they're fishing. We're gonna put that. We'll put that.
First there's no fish.
Yeah, they fish all day and they can't catch anything. He says, "Hey guys, throw your nets on the other side of the boat." And they do that, and they can't even pull it in. It's so full of fish.
Wow.
Now, I don't think all the fish were only on the left side of the lake.
No.
So,
Let's do miracles.
I'll do one more. Lazarus.
Oh, I don't
He actually
know.
brought somebody back from the dead.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, this is actually something you'll even see in like pop culture sometimes.
Yeah,
Like in science fiction movies, there'll sometimes be a Lazarus project, and they're trying to like make zombies or something.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I like
So that's
that.
something where even people who are not Christians will know that name.
How do you spell that?
Lazarus.
Pretty.
Yeah, real quick. Alright, so we have miracle stories. We have stories of him teaching. These,
Were we supposed to put this? This was on the back, right?
yeah, but you can flip it over and put miracles. You can just put miracles and put like on back if you want. We have some teaching stories. He's not performing any great miracle, but he's teaching people something. Can anybody think of a story where he was teaching? Yes.
The one with the mustard plant, where he has the seed.
Okay, so one type of teaching was parables.
We put this in the back.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
I'll just
yeah, but
leave
it was like the
one.
tiny seed and then it had a little boy.
So let's make a whole section about parables.
Oh, parables. Oh, there's
This
this.
is this on the back or the front?
Wherever you want to put it.
There's this
Where are we at?
Christian channel called Dave Star that my mom used to watch, and they always did this thing on Saturday where they played movies that they made called parables.
Let's get a couple parables. A parable is a teaching story, kind of a story to lesson.
Thank you for
So,
indulging that.
Emma said there's a parable about a mustard seed. That's a short one. He basically just says, your faith is like a mustard seed. A mustard seed is one of the smallest of all seeds. You ever see it? It's really tiny, but it grows into one of the biggest plants. What's another common parable that almost everybody knows? The story of the... There's one where a guy gets beat up on the road, and then these three people pass him by.
The Good Samaritan.
The Good Samaritan, yes.
Oh, that's a.
Oh, that's what it's called.
That's a parable, yes.
I feel like I've heard of that somewhere.
A Samaritan, right.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Samaritan, isn't that a show now?
I'm pretty
There's-
sure it's a lot.
So, the parable of the Good Samaritan, this guy is on the road, he gets beat up, and then a priest who you think would help him walks by on the other side, doesn't help him, and then a Levite, and all these people walk by, and finally a Samaritan, and Samaritans weren't liked by the Israelites, and the Israelites didn't really like Samaritans. So if there was anyone who was going to walk by and not help this guy, who would be happy he got beat up, you'd think it would be the Samaritan. But in the story, the Samaritan helps him, puts him on his donkey, takes care of him, takes him in, pays for his medical care. So there's actually a Good Samaritan law, which basically says if somebody's hurt and you help them up to your level of training, they can't sue you, basically. You're not going to be punished for trying to help them.
Okay.
Now, it's up to your level of training. So basically, if I have Red Cross First Aid and I try to do like a tracheotomy on them, I'm not trained to do that, so that's above my level of training. But if I'm trained in CPR and I perform CPR and I do everything I was trained to do, I can't be sued. So yeah, you'll see that in... Well, people say, I didn't want that, or like maybe you crack a rib while you're performing CPR, and they're like, yeah, you saved my life, you cracked my rib, so now you know, some people will sue for... What's another famous parable, another relatively well-known parable? There's one where a guy asks his dad for his inheritance.
It was about a guy.
Oh yeah.
And he goes and he spends it all.
And then
Yes.
No, I'm saying that was something that I would do.
Yeah, and then the dad throws a party for him, and the oldest son, who's like, hey, I didn't spend all your money, I've been here the whole time, why is there no party for me? And he's like, well, because the dad's like, oh, well, you know, because this is my son who was lost and now he's found.
He says, I love you and everything I have is yours, but your brother is lost and is now found, so we have to celebrate. Do you know what that's usually called?
No.
It's usually called the prodigal son.
Oh! We learned about this in social studies.
Yeah, we did.
I mean,
like, not
I didn't.
It was like one day.
And then you can
Okay. We also have just stories where Jesus, you know, just does some teaching. So a very famous one is the Sermon on the Mount. So you can write that down.
Stop it.
And part of that's it's this long part where he just does a lot of preaching. And a very famous part of that is the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor, for they will be rich in spirit. Beatitudes. Okay. So Jesus is going around. He's doing this teaching. He's doing miracles. He's doing some preaching. He's telling parables. And we have this day that we celebrated a little while ago. Before that, we had Transfiguration Sunday.
Oh, Transfiguration. Harry Potter Transfiguration?
Yeah, what does transfigure mean in Harry Potter?
Turning into a pigeon.
Turning into another
organism.
Like an animal.
It doesn't even have to be living.
Wait.
No, like,
Is the actually no?
give law of magic.
What is a figure?
It's a guy.
Right, it's like a person or an image or a shape. Trans means to change. So transfigure means to change your shape. So in Harry Potter, transfiguration is changing like this piece of paper into, you know, a pencil. Yeah, that'd be weird. I need pencil. Boom. Well, now I need paper. So the transfiguration, Jesus and a couple of disciples go on this mountaintop, and Jesus is transfigured. Okay, take your stuff. You can watch the rest of the video. We're not really sure what exactly happened, but all of a sudden he was shining white, and they saw Moses and Elijah in the clouds. And Peter says, all right, we're going to build a booth for you, Moses and Elijah, and we're just going to stay here. And Jesus is like, nope, we can't stay up here. We got to finish our work. So something changed about Jesus. We're not sure what. 'Cause he's still the same guy. He didn't have like new Jesus powers. He didn't assume his final form. He was just kind of changed somehow. We just know that something happened. But the transfiguration, after that, everything in the story starts focusing on Jerusalem. And now we get up to the week before Easter, we call
Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday, start of Lent.
The week before.
Yes. Palm Sunday is the Sunday the week before Easter, and it's the start of something called Holy Week. So write down Holy Week.
I cannot wait until Easter. Oh my God.
Why?
You don't do anything on Easter, do you? Yeah.
Lent is over.
You know,
Oh, it's taking longer than I thought. All right. So Tina already said what starts Holy Week. What's the first day of Holy Week? Tegan.
Oh, you gave me
Yeah, Palm Sunday.
Did you guys say?
Because I didn't know there was cheese in something.
That's crazy.
I know.
Alright, so we have Holy Week. This is kind of our final, it's kind of like the third act of the Gospel. So we have Holy Week. We have Palm Sunday where Jesus comes into Jerusalem on the donkey, and they're throwing all the palm leaves in their cloaks, and they seem really happy to be here.
Yeah.
Next we have what's usually called Holy Monday. Is going to be.
Wait, should we Holy Monday?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, the timeline's kind of for your reference, so write down as much or as little as you feel is necessary. You should have at least Holy Week there. On Holy Monday, one of the main things is the cleansing of the temple. He goes to the main temple in Jerusalem, and there's money changers everywhere, and there's people selling stuff for sacrifice. It looks like a marketplace. And he goes nuts. He starts
Can I say
flipping over
something?
tables. Yeah, real quick.
Why does
You
Jesus
know,
do that?
the Incans, they used to sacrifice baby pigs and burn them in fire.
I would not be
In the
surprised.
temples?
Why did he do that?
Yeah.
Well, because he was upset that they had basically turned his father's house, this holy place, this place used to worship God, into a place of business.
Oh yeah.
You know,
It's not good.
so
Wait, it's not good that they did that, right?
You know what?
No.
Oh yeah.
So Holy Tuesday, he makes some predictions about what's about to happen. He has some wise sayings. I found out this. This is Holy Wednesday, but I found out when I was doing some research for this very class that something's called a Spy Wednesday.
Why?
Because this is the day that Judas went to the officials and said, yeah, you guys are looking for Jesus, I'm going to help you get him. And this is where he arranges to betray Jesus. Thursday is Maundy Thursday.
What does that mean?
Oh shoot, it's kind of like Sad Thursday? I forget the exact definition. This is where we have the Last Supper.
Oh. What was that? I don't know. It's probably like.
Then after the Last Supper, that's when that night he goes out into the garden and he prays to God. And that night he's arrested. And during the night he's kind of shuttled back and forth between all these different courts because he's brought to the Israelite court and they're like, you know, this is a Roman matter. He brought to the Rome and they said, this is a local matter. Let the local officials do it. Yes, Elizabeth.
You spelled Tuesday wrong.
I bet I did. I'm a terrible speller.
Wait, Monday, Thursday.
Oh, you took from this really?
You need to spell it right on your thing. Then we have Good Friday. What happens on Good Friday?
Jesus.
Oh, like not eat meat or something?
Pontius Pilate and all that stuff, right?
That was Good Friday is the big event.
Or you fast, I forgot.
Yeah, it's the crucifixion.
Do you fast on Good Friday? Yeah.
Really am, right?
So Saturday in the Bible, nothing much happens. We kind of skip to Sunday. But basically the disciples, their leader had been tried and executed, so they were all kind of in hiding, so not much happened. And then on Sunday what happens? Then we have the Easter Sunday story. They go to the tomb, it's empty, he appears. Yeah, basically, yeah.
Saturday.
Saturday is the last day.
I think there's a name for it, like Silent Saturday or Holy Saturday.
That's a
Maundy. UN. So he comes back to his disciples. He appears before them a couple different times, and then after 40 days we have the ascension.
Oh my gosh, this is really
After
bad.
40 years?
It is. The ascension is where he talks to his disciples one last time, and then he ascends up into heaven. So somebody asked, like, somebody asked in the high school group, like, well, where is Jesus actually buried? But he's not because he didn't actually die.
instead of a C before
And the last thing he says to his disciples is, the last thing he says to his disciples is, go forth and baptize all nations.
Wait, when you spell ascension with a T instead of a C before the
It doesn't matter.
It might, yeah.
Gosh.
Like I said, I'm a terrible speller. Don't spell like I'm doing it. I think it's C though. It's
No, I think
either
it's C.
It just.
I'm pretty sure it's C.
Yeah.
You know, something called-
I'll look it up.
Stop it.
Oh, it's an S. We're both wrong.
Oh.
I knew none of them right.
That's
even
dumb.
Alright, so,
Put Saturday.
if you want to, it happens.
Just put Saturday.
Go wherever you want. You put Saturday, quiet.
I feel like
Okay.
a bunch of really important stuff happened, and then everybody just went back to normal and nothing happened on Saturday, and then on Sunday everyone was like, oh! You know?
So that was kind of a race through the life of Christ in about 30 minutes. Obviously, there's a lot more we can talk about, but we only have one class session. Any questions about anything or comments? Yes?
What happened after the ascension?
Okay, so
A lot.
actually, there's a whole book called the Book of Acts, which is the full name is the Acts of the Apostles. It's about what the disciples did after Christ ascended. In fact, the guy who wrote Luke also wrote Acts. Acts is like a sequel. So basically, they go out and they spread the word. His last command was to go forth and baptize all nations, so they start doing that. They go to all these towns around Greece, mainly, but in other places too, and they tell them about Jesus. And it's all about their adventures, and a lot of crazy stuff happens. One of them gets stoned to death. One gets... Saul is this guy who's persecuting Christians, but he's on the road, and Christ appears to him and says, why are you persecuting me? So he becomes... He's blinded, and he goes to this place, and they're hiding him, and he gets healed, but everybody hears he's there, and they're mad, so they have to lower him outside the wall in a basket so you can get it. A lot of crazy stuff happens in Acts, but there's a whole book about it.
Don't like 3 of the disciples get killed in a murder?
I don't know the exact number, but yeah, there's a lot that get... They definitely get imprisoned a lot, a couple get killed, yeah. So, other questions? Okay, so... Next week, chapter 9. If you're not up to 9, gotta catch up, okay? And you're up to, I think, question 50 now in your, or 45 or 50?
45.
45 in your thing, it's 9 times 5. So it's, yeah, because it's 5 questions for every chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Alright, thanks guys. Pack in your folders, put them over there. Tegan and Jaden, come with me.
Can I have another folder?
How would you like?
I